It's easy to get lost. This is The Revenue Maze, and I'm Valerie Cobb. Join me as we navigate the halls, dead ends, and U-turns on your path towards upward growth trajectory. The Revenue Maze is sponsored by Revenue North Star, guidance and execution through fractional revenue leadership, uncovering hidden revenues, and empowering small business growth through process-driven sales customized to your company environment. All right, welcome everybody. I'm super excited. This is another episode of The Revenue Maze, and I have a fantastic guest. Okay, anybody who's ever been through new product development or product development, written patents or those types of things, he's done several patents, and that means he's an inventor as well, which is super exciting. And currently, he is the CEO of Drone Industry Systems Corporations, and I want to welcome Mike DiCosola.
Thank you, Valerie. Excited to be on board here.
I think as you are so passionate because you're Italian, I'm sure that I probably didn't do your last name exactly right, but you know, at the end of the
You've
day,
got the hand movements, though.
I got the hand movements. Exactly. Yeah. Okay, Mike, everybody wants to hear a lot, anything that says the word drone in it for sure. But we want to hear more about who you are, what you're doing, all that kind of fun stuff. But we always start the show with one question. What is one thing that you can tell the listeners or viewers that they can do to help them get out of the revenue maze?
Great. Well, I think the one thing you want to do is figure out a problem and then solve the problem with a novel concept that is within reach of the current technology, and it's capable of actually creating a solution, not just acknowledging the problem, but filling a gap that might be a boutique gap or might be an all-encompassing gap that is not necessarily being paid attention to or has just been avoided for some time, and now new technology that has come can fill that gap. So I would say your core competency needs to be applied to that, of course, but that's what I would say.
Well, that just sounds so simple. Just find a gap that technology could address that they don't completely appreciate or they underappreciate at this moment, and then work that through. So give us a couple of little pointers on maybe even finding the gap. I mean, it's pretty broad, right? And sometimes people are heroes in their own minds and they think, oh, wow, this is something everybody wants. And it really isn't. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So using an example, what I had to do for myself is I had to say, okay, drones have been around forever. Actually, Nikola Tesla made the first missile, which was a drone. So,
Yeah.
so there's nothing new there, right? And
Yeah.
so, and I bring that up deliberately because a drone could be anything autonomous. And so you would think, okay, everybody's thought of everything about it, but there's so many virtual ideas, so many physical ideas, so many concepts that can be made from it. And so I had to say to myself, okay, the military was using this, but how is the commercial world going to be able to see a unique differential between what I would like to bring forward and what others would? And so that's that gap, right? Where's that gap of what differentiates you from the competition? And so for myself, it was looking at a drone and seeing somebody like Amazon 8 years ago going, we're going to deliver using drones. And I said to myself, okay, how exciting, right? My father was in the Air Force, and by the way, this triggered me to go back to school and go take a double degree in aviation transportation management with robotics and unmanned ground systems for marine ground and air for this. Okay.
I'm going, okay, I'm sitting at the seat of a master because you just did gibberish. Keep going. I love it.
So I got to, this is what triggered me on that, because I said to myself, okay, there is a gap. I'm not seeing this. I'm like, I would love drone delivery, product services, but what is the problem here? Infrastructure.
Yeah.
How do you, so infrastructure all of a sudden is a big problem. So everybody has this concept of how they're going to deliver a drone, but where was it stationed? Where was it sitting? Where did it go after it delivered it? So
That's true.
so these things just pop up. And so I was like, okay, where are we going with this? So I saw a gap, and the gap was for myself, infrastructure for autonomy. So for autonomous infrastructure, you can't rebuild the world. So
Mm.
now we have to figure out, how do we really make a novel solution within your grasp? And that's what I meant with that. Like, what is within the grasp, within your core competencies? And it's because you sit there and go, I can't redo the world, but I can repurpose specific infrastructure.
Hmm.
So that's where we created a patent that we filed in early 19 called the Smart Rooftop and Ground Drone Airport. So basically taking a rooftop that was worthless but still pre-existing as an infrastructure and turning it into a drone airport. So now that creates an infrastructure solution for drones that don't have a place to stay, charge, take off, land, frog leap between locations. So that's where that gap was. And now we needed to figure out the ancillary parts. Like, and this is where those several patents come into play, because you have to figure out the ancillaries. How do you make this novel idea a reality? And how do we integrate it into existing infrastructure, right? And that was the repurposing of.
Hmm. Wow. I just had a flashback to like food replicators from Star Trek and having it be something that was ready. And yeah, we actually see those in today. I did a
Yeah.
presentation on autonomous vehicles like a few years back based
Uh-huh.
on some of that fun stuff, but it's just like you've taken something that feels imagined a little bit and said, okay, well, here's the gap, but we do have the tech ability to do it today, right? And
Yes.
I think I hadn't even thought. I mean, that's why I'm like sitting here going, I hadn't even thought about the infrastructure portion. I mean, we do like electric vehicles, or like it's an infrastructure issue, right? Where do
Right.
you charge? Where do you go? It only goes this far. And so you saw the rise up of that. And so it just kind of went, infrastructure. I had not, honestly, I hadn't even thought of that with the drones. And I remember when Amazon said that, and it was like, that's interesting. It also reminded me of an X-Files episode that they redid. Like, I don't know, what was it, like 5 or 6 years ago, where everything was tech and you couldn't even order through a human being, and all the drones started taking over and everything. And I just thought, yeah, they have to be able to take off and park somewhere, right? I mean,
Yep.
just like if a truck is leaving from point A to point B, we've spent how many years creating roads and highways for
Yeah.
infrastructure?
And that's why that's an impossible arm to reach when you want to rebuild the world, right? So
Yeah.
that's where that repurposing, and you brought up a good point there, of existing technology. And
Yeah.
and so filling the gap allows you to do that. So like a drone hangar is equivalent to an airport hangar, and just I'm from Illinois, so just like O'Hare Airport is a Class B international airspace. Well, you have hubs, so that's the hub, but the
Yeah.
spoke in aviation, the spoke would be like a little airport, like Midway or an Elgin O'Hare or Rockford. So these are little airports. So that's a hub and spoke environment. And so now that you have the idea, you have to research, how do you integrate with current existing infrastructure? And so that's where now I take it to, where do we do that migration? How do we create the integration? And where is the gap that has not made that happen yet? And
Mhm.
that's where you brought up current technology. So there is current technology that can fill that gap. And that's where that novelty now comes in.
That is that to me, that's extremely interesting, but I'm interested in so many things. So it's hard to fascinate me in
I
things,
got it. I
But
get it.
I've always thought that that was kind of an interesting thing. You're going to get a package on your doorstep. How are you going to actually do that? And who's going to, create those hubs or whatever you're talking about. So it's a great topic on getting out of the revenue maze, because a lot of times we want something or we wish it so, and it doesn't mean the globe is ready for it, right? We talk about, hey, you can fix this problem, but a lot of times what happens is you're not even sure you're solving the right problem for that time period too.
Yes.
and,
Agreed.
I'm like,
Agreed.
huh, how do we, and how, so how, let's take us through a little of a day in a life of somebody who's obviously, it almost started with just a daydream. 8 years, what was it? How many years ago was it? And it
8 years.
prompted you to go back to school, get this education, then go and do what you needed to do to start in 2019 to now where you're going to be probably launching, right? Pretty close.
Yes.
So from a daydream, what was that like? You just kind of went, boing, I have this light bulb.
Pretty much, it's that entrepreneur spirit that kicks in, and it combines with that inventive spirit, and that's enough fuel to start you, that's for sure. But from a perspective of reality, I felt it was obtainable. It was just a true commitment, right? Where
Yeah.
I literally needed to do driving for Grubhub just to feel what somebody felt like when they didn't get a tip. I needed to feel like what it was like to have an algorithm send me 5 miles away from the best location where I live
Yeah.
to fill in somebody who just wanted one order, and there's one restaurant there on their whole application, but within my 3 blocks I had hundreds of them. But so so you have to feel the pleasures and pains of what people are going through in order to fill those gaps. It's not necessarily just the idea, the concept that sparks what you are ready to do.
Yeah.
But what are those pain points that are reflective not just on the end user, but on the operator and on the business and on maybe an infrastructure, and in this case, like aviation. You know,
Yeah.
by creating that one concept, others stemmed from it. And the reason why it took so long is because I had to look at this and go, and you said another point here, sometimes the world's not ready for something.
Yeah.
So I had to make sure this was a long-term goal, and I thought this would probably be a 10-year goal. So the question is, can I eat an elephant one bite at a time over this 10 years? And by the time the market and the world is ready,
Yeah.
where will I be? And so this was a long-term investment and commitment for myself. And that's, so you got to decide, is this something you're going to want to do within a year? Is this something, what's the executable time on this?
Yeah.
Because some things can get executed really quickly. And other things like this, it's a long-term endeavor, commitment, and sacrifice, so with no guarantees, right?
Yeah.
But but that's part of the challenge, the actual, the trip down that memory lane you're making me go through is really is really what you grasp onto, because you look back and go, wow, first off, 8 years went by. And second off, wait a minute, we're 2 years away from your goal. So but we're getting close. We're getting very, very close, and it's an exciting time. So I would say, find the problem, create the solution, feel the empathy for that problem. What is that problem solvable with a novelty idea that can actually happen in the time frame you are willing to sacrifice? Because that's another issue all in itself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think empathy is one of the things that sometimes gets missed. It's all numbers. Is there enough numbers? Especially when you're dealing with go to market, you kind of can forget that a bit. And I know there was, what was it? It was in Blue Ocean Strategy. I don't know if you've ever read that book, but they talk about, I can't even remember if it's what the name was, the company, but they were trying to come up with an iron, and everything was great with this iron, right? Clothing iron. And so they were ready to go to market. They packaged everything, and it was a dismal failure. And it was a dismal failure because they hadn't really pressure tested who their downstream really was, right? They packaged it. I can't even remember if it was because they packaged it more to a female audience, but it was really created for a male audience, or vice versa, right? So but the story is basically they had this great thing that solved this problem, and they got to the end of the tunnel, and they forgot to really kind of test the market before they launched, and even down to the packaging. And we've done kind of the state gauge process. We do the business case, and that's all the numbers, right? And then as you get into whether we should do this or not, etc., then you start testing the entire, your subsections or whatever. You start pulling people in, right? And then from there, you get their responses, you edit, you do all this kind of stuff, and then you eventually get down to some, hopefully, clinical trials and even packaging. Do they like the name? What's the price elasticity? What is somebody willing to pay? Not specific, but kind of that range. And when you started talking about, it's been this 8-year road, it goes into empathy, right? It's that one nugget that sometimes I think is completely forgotten in the testing phase is, it's that whole hero in our own mind. We think it's right. And then we forget an end user has to adopt it, right? For it to be, to actually solve a challenge and be successful, right?
Absolutely.
And so I love that. Empathy. So are you an empath? Is that when they go down the different personality types, are you an empath, or did you just learn to kind of do that in your process? How did you do that?
That's a good question. For myself, it was just, I always look at something going, look, I'll support you if it has a solution, and is that solution talking to me and my problems? And if it is, I think we have the synergy for me to go further with you. So you take my money. So it's
You all heard that. Take his money.
exactly. So that's, as a consumer, I want to feel like I can't forget that empathy for the consumer, because we all drink our own Kool-Aid. And, when we get to the point where we believe in our product, we are drunk on that Kool-Aid. So
Yes.
so because if you're not, first off, you don't believe in it yourself, it's personified. People will know that. They can tell if you like what you do, if you're really believing what you do. All these things come into play. But in the end, you said another point here, which is it's the end user, right? And one of the things I learned about indirectly was different aspects of those end users, because you would think it's just the mobile application customer, but it took me down so many different paths of empathy in different areas that you never thought would touch it, unless you really broke open, the actual matrix of it. So what was some of the problems that stem from it? Like, what were these tentacles? And one of the things that you would look at is, okay, you went to aviation, and there's another gap involved here.
Mhm.
There's no weather information that is currently available for drones that they can use between airports from ground to 400 feet AGL, above ground level. So from surface to 400 above ground level AGL, that's what they call that.
Uh-huh.
And then between airports, they use this like underground type weather information, but there's
Huh.
no like to the doorstep situational awareness of what that weather is like. So you now you have another gap, and you start stemming off and buying more, spending more attorney fees and buying more patents. So because so you start to realize, okay, aviation needs situational awareness. In
Yeah,
order to have a detect and avoid from a remote location,
sure.
I need to know what that other side is doing. How's the weather there? Can a drone, is it conducive for flight? You know, so right now there was weather needed at the doorstep. So we created the smart delivery doorbell miner. It will mine data, and it will be allowing somebody to own a doorbell, but it can attach to any shipping carrier in the world. It will
Huh.
be able to be on blockchain. So we'll be able to reward the data that's coming to us, which stems into another empathy. The
Mm.
customer always knows these days, we've all gotten wise,
Yeah.
that your data is just taken from you. And
Well,
so,
yeah. Huh.
so
Why did that commercial just show up? I
yeah,
don't know.
man, I'm man, I'm hungry. All of a sudden, your Google has some ad coming up, like so. This is the point. So people are like, wait a minute, that's my data. I want to own that data.
Yeah.
Another empathy, right? An indirect part that you don't realize. And that's why we introduced crypto utilities into another patent, because we want to be able to be transparent with a frictionless relationship where we can get that metadata from the direct customer
Yeah.
and actually provide aviation situational awareness. Now, solving this problem that was indirectly not meant to be, paid attention to in the beginning.
So this is totally genius that I haven't it's I can hear my daughter saying this. Genius. I hadn't even thought about that, It's just kind of like, oh, this is so fun, and that it isn't it's kind of eh, eh, yeah. I love it. It's fun. It's a fun road that you're going down. I mean, it's kind
Yes,
of
it's
like,
good.
okay, yeah, we're running into this. Now we got to get attorneys and a patent again.
Yeah,
And now we're running into this. And we got to get
yeah,
because there's not much disruption out there. We use the term disruption all the time, be disruptive, be disruptive. I don't know. Last huge disruption was the iPhone. And that was
there
in
you go.
2000. And that was just simply because they beat others. They were better at marketing because there were other technologies. I mean, we kind of laugh at this. It ages me, but Palm did a life drive that had a phone app in, and you could do the
Right,
stylus and all, and
right,
I'm
right.
sure if we go back in time to all the early computer processing and all that kind of stuff, there's stuff that I have zero clue that was already there, but it sounds really disruptive in what you're actually doing, because I was thinking about even drone airspace and how you have to actually get certain permits to have that airspace, and how
Yeah,
places like Amazon, how many drones will be out there. And then you probably have to deal with the privacy policies too, just like, hey,
yeah.
you can't fly over the person's backyard. Hey, they might be sunbathing with less than what you wanted to see on or whatever.
Yeah,
I'm sure
absolutely.
you have completely, Mike, thought of that too.
Yeah, actually, you had to think about that one. That's a very good point. So those are things now, like we call those roadblocks, right? So
Yeah.
how do those roadblocks now affect the concept, the novelty, and though you have to be able to defend your business model. So I would say another thing to consider as an inventor is defend your business model. Pretend like you're sitting in front of somebody and you have to defend it. And so somebody that turns around and says, I'm not letting you go over my rooftop, that's my private area. And this can happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now you could say, but you'll get crypto rewards if you do, because it's a utility. It's not a security. We give you rewards that you can apply to your favorite vendor when you do the orders. And the vendors, so now all of a sudden it's like, okay. Or you know what? Those doorbells. We also have drone landing pads that are going to be made for specific geolocations. So you can put landing pads in different areas and you can have the weather there. And now you can get rewarded that way. So now it's like, well, I don't want you to fly over my house, but I'll tell you what, I'll put a landing pad for that drone in the front of the house. And if you come by the street, you see where you got to think that way, right? So, but the crypto rewards will exchange their authority. Like we have to give the power back to the consumer. The
Sure.
consumer needs to be able, it needs to be flipped on its head. It needs to be able to say, look, you own this data. How do we compensate you for it? Because somebody is going to buy it from us. We need to be able to compensate you, and we need to incentivize the vendor. So the vendor turns around and says, wait a minute, I'm getting free what away? So it's like,
Yeah.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
but you have a captured audience, and now we can apply that towards marketing, and like an Uber or Grubhub will be able to promote you, and these can be
Mm-hmm.
applied to you. So all of a sudden now you have this environment where you have a captured audience that supports what you're doing, because you're the innovation is around them, and the empathy connects. And
Yeah.
it's not just to the operator anymore, it's to the customer and to the vendor and to the even the building owner who you're repurposing their rooftop. Now all of a sudden they say, "Well, Mike, why do I want one of those on my roof?" And will the municipality even care? Well, let's see. At this point, your roof has been a liability. Yes. Okay. And yeah, and secondly, I'm talking to a revenue officer here. Secondly, I don't see you making revenue from it. And so you
Yeah.
can either subsidize or monetize it through sensors that are going to be repurposing your rooftop. So we're going to be able to now, if you have tenants, what if you had 5 tenants, a lab testing company, a retail store, a fast food chain, convenience store? They might
Wow.
they might all want your rooftop drone airport. Maybe you'll charge them a percentage of ticket sales. Maybe you'll charge them more rent if they want that product. You see, and now all of
You
a sudden,
you have a huge education piece out there, because it's almost a bit like the cell towers, right? When people were going, but a lot smaller, because you don't really see it, right? It's on it unless they're taking off. It's on your rooftop, so it's out of your mind,
out of sight,
and
out of mind, right?
out of sight, out of mind. And you're like going, okay, yeah, but if we rent this piece of land for this cell tower, and it's like this behemoth cell tower sitting
Yeah,
in my yard, and
yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And by the way, that's another reason why it's on rooftops. See, the patent says rooftop and ground drone airport, so it uses surrounding ground space,
Mhm.
but we're all about safety, security, and sustainability.
Okay.
So bringing those drones on the roof and the sensors on the roof, we now have low weather information that's never been available.
Yeah.
We have security of the drone sitting behind the parapet wall. And so those are little features. Again, now we're looking at the empathy of the landlord, right? The
Yeah.
landlord's going, tell me why I want this, and how are you going to get this with the municipality? How are they going to get involved? So now we have another empathy, right? So how are we mixing this stew here? So
Yeah. Yeah.
now you turn to the municipality and say, listen, how about a first responder drone, an Amber Alert drone? How about a
Yeah.
911 drone? How about a news on demand drone? Why don't we have these?
I can already see all these channels. Here's your government channel. Here's your commercial channel. Here's
Yes,
your
exactly.
whatever it is going to be. And
And then you have the buy-in, right? You, you,
yeah,
you
you
have
got
the
the
buy-in.
buy-in. Yeah. It's very interesting that even in this podcast, as we've been talking a little bit, for small businesses that are trying to figure out how to get out of the revenue maze, we talk about, sometimes I really haven't brought it up much, but
Mhm.
surveying your customer constituents, right? And I thought, oh, I can see Mike. He's going to be on, like, posting on LinkedIn, and he's going to be going, what do you think?
Yeah.
So that he can find the gap, figure out what might be the gaps in the hole in the story, right? So that's the empathy thing that you were talking about, and the buy-in, the education piece. All of those things are so necessary. So, Mike, you're Italian, so we're going to
Yes.
go off a little off script. People like to also learn about the person that is on the show, right? So
Sure.
you're Italian. I brutalized your last name. I know it because I saw your look on your face, because I'm like, Coscola, Cosola, Cosola, Cosola.
You still see, you just did it perfect just now. You just did
It took me 3 times though, right? It was like,
it.
okay, in my brain. Anyways, so just, I'm not Italian, but my hands go crazy. We already talked about
You're
that.
halfway there already. I can
I'm
see.
already halfway there. I always say, well, we played one on TV, but I was an opera singer, so I sang in Italian for a
Cool. That's
time.
awesome.
But at the end of the day, what are you passionate? I know you're passionate. You're passionate about drones. You're passionate about solving problems. What are some other fun things that you do in your free time? What do you do?
Sure,
Football,
sure.
whatever.
So how do I unwind a little bit?
Yeah.
So I like playing pool. Um,
Okay.
that's one of my, if I get the time and I really want to wind down, I'll play some pool.
Okay.
Um, and then
I'm
I like,
horrible at pool. I'm
are you?
horrible. Usually they want me on the team to make sure that it's on the opposite team in pool so that the other person can win.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I just love that, it's kind of like chess where you set up the ball for the next ball, so
Yeah.
but you can't just grab it, you got to get it there. So it's like
Yep.
so that's one of the things. And I also like, to find those innovation is really, believe it or not, it's a hobby of mine. Like I like to really innovate, so I'm always listening what's out there, and trying to go from there. But on a relaxing side of things, I like going to movies. I like, I like the traditional movies,
Okay.
going to the traditional theaters, and I love those. We work a lot, right? So
Yeah.
going out to dinner, and those are little mini vacations to me. Even though I love to cook, by the way, which is
I'm
another
sure
hobby.
you do. You're Italian, right? They
Yes,
all love to
yes,
cook.
I love to cook. It'll get you here when I make my sauce, but but
I have
those
this
little mini
drone coming
vacations.
on my doorstep giving me the sauce.
Yeah, there you go. See, you filled a gap. There you go. So, but yeah, those mini vacations are so nice because it's like just stepping away, and even though sometimes you can't take a vacation, it's like having that moment where you can just enjoy yourself,
Yeah.
and then appreciate the person who's taking care of you. You always got to appreciate them because they're hard workers, and that's a way of kind of like giving back,
Yeah.
and kind of not losing that human factor, you
Sure.
know. So
Yeah.
that's it.
Well, that actually, now I'm hungry because I'm thinking of Italian food, and I just had that on. It was funny because we went to the movie. We just saw Where the Crawdads Sing,
Okay.
and I had a bucket. I always buy, and this is because, and it's so funny because we talk about pricing decoys, for everything, and I always
Mhm.
buy the big bucket, right? And that is because it's just more for me. Even though if I don't eat it all, it feels like I won something, right?
Right, right.
Same price. I got more for because it really cost them, like, what, 50 cents to make that popcorn. And
I'm
and
going for the volume.
and it was just this great memory because it was like, okay, we watched this great movie. We went to an Italian restaurant, believe it or not, right
Oh, there
before
you go.
it. And I had this amazing Parmesan chicken, and
Now I'm getting hungry.
now I'm getting, yeah. So you brought that up, and you know what? It's true. It's a little bit giving back. I jokingly talked about the X-File episode, and if you haven't seen it, I don't remember the title, but it was all around not tipping a robot. The entire problem with all the drones and everything, and it's like, you have 5 more seconds to tip this robot. And they wouldn't do it. They, Fox and Mulder wouldn't do it. And then at the last 3 seconds, it's like, here, we're going to pay the tip because my whole smart house went against me. My whole everything went out against me. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, it's just, it is showing that appreciation back to that person who works so hard, for sure. And
absolutely.
And
again,
so
that falls back to empathy, right?
Yeah, it falls back to empathy. Exactly. So anyways, well, Mike, this has been like such a fun dialogue. These are some of my favorites when we get into tech, because I'm such a sci-fi geek to begin with. And I would love, I know a lot of the people would like to know how to even get a hold of you, to maybe run ideas past you, whatever,
Sure.
What's
Absolutely.
one way?
So you can get me on LinkedIn at just Mike DiCosola, DiCosola. You can also get me at droneindustrysystems.com, and then .io, where the NFTs are for those smart delivery doorbells.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and then we have another website called Smart Delivery Drone. So these are all the developments that .com that we're working on right now.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, everyone, thank you so much for listening, viewing, whatever you do with this episode. I think it is so much fun to do these. It's kind of my own personal therapy. So anybody, if you like it, you want to chat, whatever, on the episode, we're so glad that you listened in on this. And Mike, I just want to thank you again.
Valerie, thank you. It's been absolutely fun, and I'm so appreciative of you inviting me. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you all for joining another great episode. For show notes, links, and resources, visit revenuemaze.com. Hats off to all you small businesses out there. I can't wait for the next episode.